Hello everybody and welcome to this masterclass on how to reduce single-use plastics for hotels. Welcome everybody, and if you can slowly start saying to us where you're coming from and who you are, so that we have a bit of a clear view of where are we, who are we talking and where are we reaching today with this masterclass. We already got some comments. So we got people from Girona, people from Cyprus, Eleni, Vanessa also is coming from Spain, people from the UK, currently in Morocco. We don't know, maybe stuck in Morocco, this person from the UK, Aileen. Then we got also Victor from Tarragona, Nora from Germany. Oh, we got Lorraine from Kenya as well. We got people from Kenya joining us. That's great. Also, Santa Lucia in the Caribbean, Matt Frender. Well, thank you everybody, and yeah, we are going to give a couple of minutes so that everyone can connect. And in the meantime, we're going to present ourselves and present our panelists today. And we are very happy to be sharing this space. So my name is Angela. I'm an editor of Travindi. Travindi is a news platform that tells sustainable tourism stories from around the world. We are registered as a social enterprise in the UK, and we have both an English and a Spanish version. Today I will be leading these webinars together with my colleague Karen. Karen, she's coming from Mexico, and she can introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Well, my name is Karen. I'm the co-founder of Cómo Travel. And well, Cómo Travel is a startup that aims to connect travelers with local communities around the world. We want to promote community-based tourism because we dream to travel to discover new cultures, reconnect with nature, and create real relations between visitors and people willing to show their lives. And since we start with this coronavirus problem and crisis, we start to make these type of webinars because we think we need to connect even though we are online. So we hope to continue doing this type of reunions. And well, that's all. And I'm going to, in the middle of the presentation of Jo, we're going to have a dynamic that is a real-time quiz. I'm going to send to you via chat this link so you can all have the link prepared once we're going to start with the quiz. And Angela?
Okay, so yes, this is going to be a masterclass. It's going to be based on 2 blocks of knowledge sharing. Jo is going to be in charge of doing this masterclass because he is the expert here on how we're going to reduce single-use plastic in hotels. In the middle of these 2 blocks, we're going to have this quiz that Karen was talking about. Just keep checking the chat. We're going to be sending this link to join the quiz in real time every now and then, but this quiz is not going to be available until we make it live in the middle of the class. Okay, so the aim of this session today is to learn a few tips on how to reduce single-use plastic at hotels by working with hoteliers, with the staff, and with the supply chain. So for this, we are very lucky today to have Jo Hendricks here with us. Jo is a sustainability professional with more than 20 years of experience in the tourism sector. She has worked extensively with hotels and accommodations worldwide since 2001, helping managers navigate expectations for health, safety, quality, and sustainability. Empowering more than 2,500 colleagues and inspiring many more, Jo has a gift for bringing sustainability to life with practical, implementable advice for staff at all levels. Increasingly concerned about the impacts of unnecessary plastic and waste, Jo was motivated to create Travel Without Plastic to support hoteliers that want to make a difference. Jo is going to tell us a little bit more about Travel Without Plastic in a minute. For the moment, I just welcome Jo to this masterclass, and thank you very much for being here today with us.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Karen, for all of your help in setting this up and for sharing all of the promotion of the event. It's been really great to see. I'm going to share my screen now with you here. Apologies if these things get in the way, so that you've got to the presentation that I'm going to run you through today. So I want to jump straight in and let you know what the agenda is that we're going to cover. And I'll be doing a quick introduction to Travel Without, to who we are and what we do. So I want to run very quickly through our 3-phase approach that we share with hotels who want to actively reduce single-use plastic from their operations. And as Karen and Nicola have explained, we've got a short quiz in the middle so that you don't have to be toured for too long time. I want to go through some inspirational ideas, even in times of COVID, that hotels still take now, or that they can for when they reopen and when we start to see a recovery in travel. And then we'll finish with 5 practical top tips that we find work for most of the hotels that we have been spending time with. So quick introduction to us. This is myself and Rachel McCaffrey, who is my business partner in Travel Without Plastic, and some of you may know her already. I originally founded Travel Without Plastic back in 2017, and if you can believe it, actually started as a Facebook page, and it was because of a trip to America and the Cayman Islands where I was just horrified by the amount of single-use plastic at the breakfast buffets every day, every hotel we stayed in, and worked plastic reduction since 2011. I knew there's a lot that hotels could be doing to make changes, and the only thing I could think to do right at that moment was to create a Facebook page and to share insight that I had that I thought would help hotels to make a difference. So I set in 10 minutes and I went out to work, and when we came back we already had 100 followers. And one of those followers actually knew us very well and knew that not only did we have a sustainability background, but also that for 7 years of my career I was actually a health and safety advisor in hotels. This has probably been one of the great keys to our success, because everybody that knows us knows that we know all of the pressures on hotels, whether it's their budget, quality expectations, health and safety, or more. So what we did for that particular person was we created a digital toolkit for their hotels in Greece and Turkey. And that then developed and it became the Let's Reduce Single-Use guide and tool that you can see a screenshot of there on the screen today. And we update this content now every year to share with people who have bought that toolkit. So what we do is we help hotels to identify where and how single-use plastic is used in their operations, how much it actually costs their business, and how they can prioritize whether they eliminate it, they reduce it, and how they make the right decision with alternatives should they choose to implement alternatives, and how also to engage their staff and their guests with those changes so that they get the support along the way. And very importantly, we help them to understand how they can monitor and measure their impact. We also run Let's Reduce Singles workshops. The toolkit is actually designed as a do-it-yourself kit to reach as many people as possible with available digital, but we do still find hotel groups or destination-based organisations prefer us to deliver those workshops in person. And these work quite well because we bring lots of different destination stakeholders together. So for this workshop you see on the screen in Florida, we actually invited lots of local businesses who already make alternatives to single-use plastic, so that we could encourage hotels in that area to buy locally. Now, obviously, since we've had the COVID-19 outbreak, then clearly we're looking at switching more to webinars for this type of thing this year. Of course, that's been something different that we've pivoted to for the remainder of 2020. One of the most useful workshops we ever did was for a group of hotels in Turkey last year, from Cyprus agendas today, so she may recognise a couple of her colleagues on the screen there. What we did here was we invited a local representative from a health and safety group called Crystal Standards, and they helped us to co-deliver some of the sessions around health and safety and sustainability, but in Turkish. So for those of you that don't know, Crystal Standards is a health and safety organisation. They carry out audits in hotels, they provide support to hotels, and often when we talk to hotels about replacing single use, we want them to consider reusable alternatives. And many people have concern about hygiene when it comes to reusable alternatives. It's much more credible, even with our background in health and safety, it's more credible if there is a representative there from a health and safety organisation to help us deliver that content. And what we've also done is we've enabled at least 30 minutes for direct questions and answers for hoteliers to be able to ask that representative. And we're hoping that we can translate that type of in-person workshop into webinars for the remainder of this year, because we really recognise the value in being able to co-host those sessions. And I think this type of collaboration between sustainability and health and safety is really important at the moment, particularly now with the amount of new awards and certifications that many of you will have seen around hotel cleanliness standards. If you read these carefully, you'll notice that hardly any of them actually talk about reducing waste. And in fact, many of them suggest cleaning with single-use wet wipes, wrapping the television remote control in plastic, adding single-use wipes and face masks and gloves to an amenity kit now, and we'll talk more about that later. But we think it's really important that we remember hoteliers have a lot of priorities and are very concerned at how they can be hygienic but also reduce waste. Most of the people we've spoken to don't want to return to single-use plastic, and they want professionals like us and those in the health and safety field to help them to navigate what it looks like to come back to work, to reopen those hotels and still balance the issues around the spread of infection and the prevention of waste. Obviously, we know that we are going to have to accept some additional single-use plastic this year, probably into next year as well. And we're realistic about that. Our advice then to hotels that have to do this is to think very, very carefully about how to prevent the personal protective equipment in particular from becoming litter. So it's really important, if hotels choose to use these or if they are obliged to use these, that they know how to make sure staff and guests know how to dispose of them properly. And they're very lightweight materials, so bins will need lids, otherwise it's highly likely that they're going to fly off into the environment, or they go down storm drains and drainage and straight out to sea. And I don't think anybody on this call would want to see masks and gloves making it into the top 10 items that are recovered during beach cleans. So let's move into the three-phase approach that we take with hotels and accommodation providers, even now in times of coronavirus so that they can reduce single use, or at the very least they can make informed decisions on those alternatives. And the very first step is to know the baseline. So firstly, if they're not already, we suggest that hoteliers are very, very clear on their baseline cost and consumption of plastic. So we all know the saying that we can't measure, or we can't manage what we don't measure. So if you don't already measure how much plastic the business consumes, then this is obviously where to start. And if you do measure how much plastic the business consumes, do you proactively use that information to decide what could be reduced or eliminated? Or have you fallen into a pattern of just reordering those single-use items when the stock runs low? So in our toolkit, for instance, we provide a self-assessment questionnaire and a consumption spreadsheet so that hotels can be clear on where plastic is used, how much is used, and how much it costs. And then with this information, the hotels can prioritize the types of plastic that they would like to eliminate or reduce. Now, some of them might be motivated by the environmental impact, and they may choose the items that they consume the most. Others will be motivated by the cost, so they may choose items that save the most money. But everybody will need to think about new legislation or new standards because of COVID-19, and everybody will need to plan for these. But businesses will need to make the decisions depending on what is right for them. So what is right for them? Let's have a look at how we might define unnecessary. So if you look in a dictionary, in the English dictionary anyway, the definition of unnecessary is not needed. Now, the problem with this is that we all perceive needs very differently. Now, if you ask most housekeepers if these items that you can see on the screen are necessary, they will say yes. And why would that is? We ask this question all the time. They always say they are necessary. And it's because these types of kits form part of a standard operating procedure. So for the housekeeper, a part of their job every day is to restock these items. It's a necessary thing for them to do. So nobody questions if it's the right thing to do or whether things could actually change. When we ask hotel managers the same question, many of them say, yes, these items are necessary. And again, that comes back to the brand standard. So in many, many workshops that we've delivered, personally, staff don't believe these things are necessary, but it's because they have to put them in the guest room. That word necessary means they just continue to be replaced and replaced without question. So I think it's important that we firstly recognise as an industry that we have convinced ourselves that these types of products are a sign of good quality. And we've been so good at convincing ourselves of this that we've made them now into an expectation. And the truth is, if we are true to ourselves, that most of the items are not really good quality. I don't know if any of the ladies on the call have tried to get plastic combs through their hair. That's practically impossible. There are many hotels that provide shoe shine kits where most of the guests are wearing flip-flops and will never use them. I know that my husband is terrified of the razors in the hotel because to use them would just mean cutting yourself because they're such poor quality, and that the slippers that are usually one size fits all means they don't really fit anybody. But somehow or other we've convinced ourselves that we need these things. And it's a very similar situation with bottled water. what if the tap water is perfectly safe to drink? But then we need to be realistic. Not everybody is happy to drink the tap water. And sometimes if it's safe, it also doesn't taste very nice. But if it's not safe to drink, hotels do need access to water, but is it essential that it's provided in the guest room? And again, this comes down to brand standards. A hotel that I work with quite closely here in Gran Canaria, over the last year, they have seen an increase in complaints because they provide bottled water branded with their hotel name, and the guests have started to complain because they really don't think that the hotel is doing the right thing by offering single-use bottles of water. So it's probably not a great brand standard if we start to look more deeply into it. But the choice really comes down to the pros and cons of the alternatives. And at the moment, even for hotels that have eliminated these type of things, there are still questions around returning to single use because of COVID-19, and it's been a key question we know from many of the attendees before they've come into this webinar today. You know, will single use increase in hotels that had previously eliminated it? Will hotels introduce even more single use because of hygiene measures? And this is where we really need to involve more people in that decision-making process, which takes us quite nicely on to our step 2. And that's to engage other people, to know the information that you have got from your baseline exercise, so you know what you're consuming and how much. To make any changes and for them to be successful, you need to get the support from staff and guests for that to work. And so what we have seen works really, really well if we don't hold a workshop for the hotel, is that the hotel organises a workshop itself amongst their own staff. And we always suggest involving representatives of every department in that workshop. And this is because when a change is made in one department, it's very, very probable that it will affect people in other operational areas. A good example of that is the hotel in Gran Canaria, where they wanted to look at changing the plastic bottles, and they wanted to switch them for glass bottles that could be returned to the supplier. And the issue that they discussed around the table is that the housekeeping trolleys actually weren't equipped to carry heavy glass bottles, especially because in some corridors there were carpets. It was very difficult to maneuver the trolley. Because they were all sat at the table, it was actually the food and beverage manager who suggested the solution, and that was that his team, who were responsible for changing the items in the minibar, could use their trolleys, which were different and could take better weight, and that they would actually be the team that replaced the guest water in the guest rooms every day. Bringing those teams together and having them discuss their challenges actually made it much more easy to find solutions that work. And it means it promotes great teamwork, but also the ideas that come from the staff themselves are much more likely to be implemented simply because it was their idea. But it's also really important any of these changes are supported by guest communications, and I'll come on to that a little later on. And then finally, the third phase is to implement those changes and evaluate them. And despite everything that you can do to research whether or not a change will work for your business, you never really know until you implement it. So before making any final changes, or before you make a major purchase, an expensive purchase of alternative items, we suggest trialing those changes and taking the time to get feedback from guests and from staff. And that will help you to understand if you're on the right track, whether you need to reconsider any changes, whether you need to do things differently. And it's obviously much better to find this out regularly rather than waiting until the end of the season. So for instance, if you have decided to change to making straws available on request or making amenities available on request, you want to check the consumption regularly. If you find that you're still buying the same number of straws or amenities, then something with that request policy isn't working, and you would need to adjust and find out what that is. And then also very important, particularly now, is to keep up with any impending legislation, any new changes because of COVID, and they can be very different in different areas. And also to keep up to date with all of the new alternatives as they come into the marketplace. This is very dynamic. There are lots of new products on the marketplace, and not all of them are as green as they seem. Now, we see this all of the time. Hotels that believe they have done the right thing by purchasing a compostable or a biodegradable alternative, only to find they actually can't dispose of that alternative properly in their destination. So what's happening now, instead of previously being able to recycle the traditional plastic, now they are having to send all of these single-use items to a general waste, which is most likely going to end up in landfill, or worse, they may make it into the natural environment. And even if they are littered, they still pose a huge threat to wildlife. Despite being compostable, they could still be in natural environments for many, many years, because the composting needs to take place in an industrial facility, and there are very few destinations that have those facilities at the moment. Obviously, a lot of the legislation, even the EU Plastics Directive, does recommend compostable and biodegradable plastics. Our suggestion to businesses considering this would be to make sure that they check whether there is an infrastructure in their destination to be able to recycle these products and turn them into compost, and if not, maybe to consider a different type of alternative, and to really plan ahead for how we can bring reusable alternatives into the hotel space. Otherwise, all we're doing is we're replacing one type of single-use waste with another type of single-use waste, and we're actually not reducing waste at all. We're really just keeping the waste the same, but we're changing the type of waste that's being produced. So there are many, many things for hotels to consider, and many, many times this is where they come to us to ask for some help in helping them to navigate these situations that are very complex, but it's very encouraging to us that hotels want to eliminate plastic but still be able to meet those hygiene concerns. So that covers an initial introduction to our 3 phases and some of the ways that we would support the hotels and the advice and the recommendations that we would give. And so that we change our tack a little bit, I'm going to hand back to Karen, who will explain how we are going to do the interactive quiz if I stop sharing there. And so you'll get an opportunity not to listen to me for a while and to do something a little bit more exciting. Thank you, Karen.
Great. So I just send you right now in the chat the link that you can open. And I'm also going to send it via YouTube for the people that are watching us there. Now it's there. Perfect. So once you open this link, this is going to be an online quiz. So you just need to put a nickname and wait for us to start the game. This is like a game. It starts with a questions and several answers. Then you need to select the answer and click to the sending button. And then at the end of the game, we're going to see a leaderboard, and we can see like how many people answer right and wrong. I mean, this is only for fun, so don't worry. I'm going to share my screen. So if you have a problem opening the quiz or something, don't worry, because we're going to show the quiz also here in my computer. So you don't have to worry about it. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. So you should see something like this. Just let me know if everybody can see. If you can maybe write on the chat or giving a sign that you can actually see my presentation and that you can, or you are already connected. I can see people connecting. Here I can see 5 users. So I'm going to give maybe 10 more seconds. Just for you to know, once we start, we're going to have 20 seconds to answer. And then after those 20 seconds, we're going to have 10 seconds to check why that was the right answer. And maybe here I can mute myself, Jo, and you can read the questions out loud. Like that we can all see the same, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect, okay. Great, so we already have people connected. Maybe 1 more second because I can see people is getting online. If you have a problem, don't worry, because you can see it also in my screen. And after we finish, once we finish, we go back with the presentation with Jo. Great, so I think it's time to start the game. I'm going to put my, I'm going to mute myself and we can listen to Jo. And let's go.
Okay, great. So housekeeping replace bottled water daily in this hell room. If the bottle is littered in the environment, how long will it take to decompose? Actually, 450 years. So we use it once today, 450 years, it's still in our environment. Okay, well done. True or false? In Rwanda, you can be jailed for using a plastic bag. Okay, this is actually very true. There are now jail sentences in Rwanda if you use a plastic bag, both for local people and for tourists. How many countries in the world have introduced plastic bag bans? So 192. Interestingly, we are just working on some research with the UN, and we've used the statistics from the UN on the research to take that information. So 192. Not all of them necessarily are working. And the example we just gave of Rwanda, for instance, I read the other day when looking at this report that this has actually started a black market in plastic bags from neighbouring countries, and that's particularly affecting people that work on markets, individual market sellers. It's having quite an impact on their actual day-to-day life, and it just shows that the bans don't always necessarily work unless they are well thought through. So it's just an interesting point of view. Next question, Karen. Okay, so according to research by UNEP, how many times do you need to use a paper bag until it has the same climate impact as a plastic bag? So 4 to 8 times. And realistically, how many of us will use a paper bag 8 times? That's not necessarily always going to be the case, particularly if you maybe carry frozen food in a paper bag, for instance, and it doesn't last as long. So again, these are some of the trade-offs that hoteliers may need to be considering if they want to take an overall environmental viewpoint of the changes that they make. And it's a similar question for a cotton bag. How many times would you need a cotton bag before it has the same climate impact as a plastic bag? So 50 to 150 times, and that's really because of the resources that go into growing and creating a cotton bag in the first place. So let's imagine now a guest orders a drink from the beach bar and it comes with 2 straws. How long does it take those straws to degrade? An estimated 200 years. If you got that one right, well done. True or false? Spain consumes more plastic straws than any other country in Europe. That's actually true, according to an article, well, to some research that was undertaken, mainly because of the tourism, obviously, but very interesting to see those statistics. So according to an article by the Olive Press there, and how many on average per year in that case are being consumed in Spain? So 4.75 billion. It's something like 13 million straws a day in Spain alone. And we're seeing an increase in these types of things now. Higher end hotels increasingly opt for coffee pods on buffets and in guest rooms, but how long do these take to degrade? So the estimate at the moment is 500 years. A heck of a long time just for one coffee. And then imagine as housekeeping make a final touch to the room clean schedule and a plastic liner is placed into a bin. Until what year could that bin liner still be on the planet? The estimates there are that liners can take up to 1,000 years to degrade. Which of these items do you think is the most commonly found item on beaches? And the correct answer, cigarette butts. So according to organisations that run beach cleans in different areas of the world, the most common item, cigarette butts. True or false? The most common type of plastic litter in the ocean comes from ships at sea. That's actually false. Most of the plastic in our oceans is actually washed out to sea or taken there by rivers, lakes, and storm drains. So most of the plastic in our ocean is actually coming from the land. Another true or false, this sign on a container means it is recyclable. True or false? That's actually false. The numbers inside the triangle just tell us which type of plastic it actually is. It doesn't necessarily mean it's recyclable, because that very much depends on the destination and whether those types of plastics are accepted for recycling in certain destinations. So it's very subjective. Definitely does not mean it's recyclable. So what about this? We see this regularly on packaging. Does this sign mean it's recyclable? True or false? So this is actually false as well. This is the green dot, and what this is it's a financing symbol. So it shows the organisations that have created that plastic have paid a price to help with its recovery, but it doesn't mean it's recycling or it's recyclable. Sometimes very, very confusing for us as consumers. But also for those people responsible for purchasing in hotels. And there's a lot of call at the moment for signage like this to be made much more clear, so that it can help us all to make the right decisions. So just a few more questions to go. You've probably read these statistics many, many times. How many million tons of plastic are dumped into our oceans every year? So the correct answer there is actually 8 million tons. And this is an interesting one. True or false? There are 51 trillion microplastic particles in the ocean today. Oh, that's quite a high number. Very, very good to almost everybody there. That's a true one. That's almost 500 times more than stars in the galaxy. It's almost too much to imagine. Okay, so how much water does it take to produce one 1 litre bottle of water? That's 3 bottles of water. So to produce 1 litre of water, for every litre bottle of water sold, we've used 3 litres of water to create it, not to mention the energy associated with transporting them around. And the last question, I think here, true or false, all compostable plastics are biodegradable? Actually true. So all compostable plastics are biodegradable, but not all biodegradable plastics are compostable. They report out by WRAP, which is a UK organisation that looks into all the different packaging. And you can see how confusing this becomes for us as consumers, but for hoteliers as well, to make the right decisions. And there are many calls now to ban the use of the words compostable and biodegradable being used together, as they're on this particular picture, because those terms are very much dependent upon the environment that these products will move into in the end. So if they're listed in the land, for instance, and they're in sunlight, they will degrade much quicker than if they are littered at sea and they become marine plastic. So it's very, very dependent on such a range of factors that there are calls now to say that these types of work are actually confusing to customers and they are not helping us to make the right decisions. So I think that was great. Karen, you can let us know what happens now with the quiz results.
Yeah, so well, actually we had a winner with a lot of points, which is Ilonka, I think, Blanca, and El. Those are our three participants that got the most of this. But I mean, at the end, the idea is that we all learn. So I hope you like the activity and I can come back to you if it's okay.
Great, thank you. I think it's really interesting. There's clearly no prizes for the winner. And clearly a lot of those estimates haven't been around for a few years with plastic to know whether these estimates are actually true. So it's difficult to say, and there are many people who would possibly question some of those estimates as well, but it's there just to give us an idea, and so that we can start to think about the impacts ourselves. So let me move on. If we carry on now with the remainder of today's presentation, what I want to do is just take some time to run through some potential ideas of how to reduce single-use plastic even now. And I do need to be very clear, not all of these recommendations will work for every type of accommodation. And we're designed to help people to think differently and to think longer term. So even if they've had to return to single use now, they start to plan for a better balance in case we find ourselves in a similar situation again, but also to know that they are genuinely helping to keep people safe and protect the planet at the same time. And I think it's fair to say that there are now previously unthinkable strategies that are becoming reality. So you might have read in the news that Milan is proposing to implement walking and cycling paths in streets that were previously dominated by cars. I read a similar proposal for London last week. This probably never would have happened without the COVID-19 crisis. So things that we never have considered before or might have fought against before are now actually becoming a reality. And it doesn't mean everybody is enthusiastic about that change, but it means there's definitely less resistance to change than there was before. And we can apply the same logic to making changes in hotels so that we can help staff and guests to support those changes. So firstly, I want to look at one of our favourite topics, that's hotel amenities. I noticed in the chat there's a lady there who's an executive housekeeper, and I'm sure that you would be able to make some comments on this, and please feel free to drop comments or questions into the chat. We've actually suggested in our latest blog that hotels can now use this time maybe to introduce bold new brand standards that could see us take some of these products out of hotel rooms forever and not reuse them. And if we think about this rationally, instead of now adding to the guest experience, they're adding to the list of items that housekeeping teams have got to clean and sanitize. So imagine if you have stayed in a hotel room and you did not use the toiletries, you check out day, how do the housekeeping teams know that you've not used them? Just because you haven't emptied the bottle doesn't mean you haven't touched them. Will they really have the time now to sanitize every single item properly, when we bear in mind that actual sanitizing means leaving the sanitizing product on those items for at least a minute? We're going to follow the dwell time to. So yes, we were discussing the issues around amenities and the potential different options there that hotels can introduce, and we've got to follow in refills, potentially making those available on request, which could be done at reception, or they could be told about it at reception when they arrive. But whatever you do, you really need to think about the customer communication to make this transition as smooth as possible. And the best way to do that is to tell customers why you're making those changes and what the alternative course of action is that they need to take. Obviously, in all of these scenarios, we would still suggest that soap or hand washing gel is provided at restrooms. That's not an amenity that we would suggest you removed. But what we do say to hotels is give some time now, if you can, to think about all the media platforms that can use to reach guests both before and during their stay. So maybe you can put information onto an email confirmation. You can post on social media, a newsletter. You can have pop-ups on the website, for instance, that may encourage guests to travel with their toiletries, or be a polite notice in the room to let guests know that they're available on request or even for sale. Or a notice that gives them confidence that the refillable amenities are cleaned and sanitized daily. As we said, now more than ever before, it seems people will be more likely to accept these changes. What we really want to avoid, if at all possible, are things like this, COVID kits, unless you absolutely have no choice, obviously. If you're obliged to put this into hotel rooms, then you have to do that. We would then ask that hotels are completely sure that staff and guests are using these things properly, and that you know how to manage them when they become waste, and particularly to avoid contamination, but also to avoid them becoming litter. So if we move to the buffet, and being realistic, I believe that more hotels will actually implement individual food options now because of COVID. I think we're going to see more of the individual jams like this. I think the same thing is possibly going to happen again with butter. I get the feeling from having spoken to hygiene specialists that they agree with this short term, and short term it could be the best course of action. But what about the rest of the buffet? And I think it's a big if at the moment, if buffets continue like this at all. But if they do continue like this, it makes no sense then that the jam and the other condiments should be in plastic packages. how would it be possible that just jam and butter are unhygienic, or that coronavirus will only fit on jam and butter? There are many, many other areas of the buffet that we need to consider for hygiene purposes. So imagine, for instance, tongs used for salads and for all areas of the buffet. We package jam and butter to be hygienic, but we hardly ever change the serving tongs that are touched by hundreds of people at a buffet. But I do honestly believe that now, because of COVID-19, the approach to the buffet is going to change, and I think this is a clear opportunity for hygiene specialists and for sustainability specialists to work together, so that we can create better systems, balance hygiene and packaging waste. But we have the opportunity to do so much more with that as well, because if food waste were a country, it would actually be the third biggest emitter of carbon dioxide. So if we look at the potential proposed strategies to change the buffet system, we can see we also have a lot of synergies there in preventing food waste. So maybe we start to think about these differently. It will require very, very good communications to get staff and on board with new changes. But I think when they're presented in a way so people see it's their good, it benefits them, but it also benefits them. It's possible to do this. And we're already accustomed to omelette station at breakfast in the morning, where our food is prepared on demand. It's possible that this type of service in certain types of hotels does replace the buffet. There are a lot of thought needs to go in to how to do this. But having food servers not only reduces portion sizes, because we will be served with a specific portion in mind. Guests are less likely to repeat. Quite easy to go up to an anonymous buffet 4 or 5 times for the same thing. It's less easy to go up to the same person to fill your plate 4 or 5 times. So we might actually see that we can also reduce food waste. But if more food is cooked to order, depending on what type of food it is, there may be less requirement for pre-preparation, less requirement for cling film, less requirements for packaging, maybe more a la carte nights where food is served at the table, or maybe even if, to something that I call partial board, and something that some hotels have done for many years, and that's that they close down their buffet restaurants for 1 or 2 nights in the week, and they either operate their own a la carte to generate income, or they encourage guests to eat out at local restaurants, which is great to actually drive a local economy recovery, depending obviously on where the guests eat. Or maybe they do both. They have a la carte available and they give people the choice to eat out. So it's actually a great opportunity to negotiate some deals with local restaurants, great communication, and a great way to start to reset some of those expectations. What we absolutely want to avoid at all costs
Jo, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. What can you stop presenting and we can share our screen, because I think we still yeah. Angela is going to show the presentation, and like that I think maybe
okay.
Let's hope we can listen to you better.
So yeah, I wanted to move on to cold water. So we covered this a little bit in the quiz and a little bit earlier in the presentation. We didn't go into some of the hygiene considerations around bottling water on site for service or for refills. So I wanted to cover some benefits of this type of system, which helps you to reduce plastic waste and reduce storage requirements, because water can be produced on demand. And also for wider environmental impacts, it helps to reduce associated emissions with transporting water bottles backwards and forwards, and it serves still or sparkling water, which is great. These types of bottles can also be hygienically washed through a dishwasher. Most of the companies will offer a monthly payment to make it affordable to hotel budgets. And for hotels where it's really important to maintain an income stream, you can obviously continue to sell bottled water when it's gone through a filter system. You can't sell tap water in a bottle, but you can sell filtered water. And if water is provided complimentary, then it does significantly save costs. We'll be able to share some detail of companies that are you make some contact with them. If you move to the next slide, there are still considerations. I mean, there are no perfect answers at any time, so you always need to weigh up the pros and the cons. That's where it's great to be able to involve as many members of the team as possible when you're making these decisions. So we went backwards, not forwards, but I'm sure we'll catch up. So some of the considerations then, particularly for hygiene, are to choose bottles that have wide necks at the top. And this is because it makes them much easier when they go through dishwasher to make sure that they're hygienically cleaned. And it also there is less chance of the mouthpiece or the neck of the bottle touching the refill taps if refill taps are used. You would need to ensure that you had extremely good refill protocols for staff. And obviously glass bottles are not permitted at pools and beaches, but many of these companies also offer reusable plastic bottles. Now, in some cases, these reusable plastic bottles look so good that they are very tempting for customers to take home, and that becomes expensive for a hotel to manage. So this is again where you would need to consider a potential deposit system, similar to how you might run a deposit for beach towels or other types of products in the hotel. One of the reasons that a lot of hotels we work with haven't yet set these systems up, even though they want to, is that they require, in some cases, a structural change to the layout of the kitchen, and that's to accommodate maybe an extra dishwasher, for instance, or extra storage that keeps glasses safe. And that's very difficult to do when a hotel is fully operational. Obviously now is a good time to think about being able to make those changes, because there isn't going to be the impact to the guest experience. We also need to look at the staff training and the communication to guests around that, and there are really good ways to do that. You also need to ensure, if you use an osmosis system, that you capture that wastewater, because some of these systems can be very wasteful. And if you need to tick your Travel Life boxes, your Green Globe boxes, Green Key, whatever certification schemes you work with, you don't want to find that you've looked at one problem, have found a solution to one problem, but caused another. So technical teams can very easily take that wastewater and they can reroute that into gardens, for instance, which is a useful thing to consider. If you move to the next slide, Angela, and we're almost near the end. Self-refill. This is obviously a really big thing in terms of hygiene, and was one of the questions that, or one of the issues that generated the most questions in our workshop in Turkey, is how do we implement these type of systems for guests to refill themselves, particularly in all-inclusives, and keep them hygienic. Now, you might have seen these in airports already. They are quite popular, these types in airports, and when you put the reusable bottle close to the dispenser there, it actually works on a light. So when the light is blocked, the water will dispense, and that means that at no point does anybody need to touch buttons. At no point will the neck of a bottle touch a tap that somebody may have drank from. But it's really clear that it's very helpful to a hotel to engage their hygiene company at this point, and to maybe do an individual consultation with them and ask the hygiene companies to help you to implement systems that are hygienic but also help you to balance your waste. And when you have those conversations, it's very likely that you will come to a conclusion that's suitable for all of those boxes that you need to tick. If you move on, Angela. Fabulous, thank you. Very high on the agenda is obviously cleaning at the moment, and most of the cleaning products in hotels do come in plastic packaging, and very often those packages or those bottles or the big carafes of cleaning products, they're not returnable to the supplier. Now, in some cases they may be, but in cases they're not. And that type of plastic is designed to be reused and reused and reused. But what happens is the hotels become responsible for recycling them, or on the content for disposing them with hazardous waste. But there are a lot of new opportunities on the market now in terms of technology, some of which not only help to reduce plastic, but they also help you to reduce toxic chemicals. Again, we can share some of the details about these companies. But this is great in terms of reducing waste, reducing chemical use, reducing costs for hotels, which is very important at the moment. But not only that, it's safe for staff, it's safe for the customers, it's respectful to the environment, and it's a really good communications message. It's a great way to communicate the cleaning standards that we looked at the beginning of the presentation, but to also be able to do that, giving people the confidence that you're looking after the environment at the same time. If you move on, Angela, to some of the things that we really want to avoid, if possible, and that's the use of single-use wipes. So even though we have read and we've seen some operating procedures suggesting that we use single-use, they are causing significant issues in sewer systems. Most of them are made from plastic fibres. So we would very much approach this from take a reusable cloth and opt for reusable cloths, but try where possible to use natural microfibers over synthetics, as a microfiber cloth, when it goes through the wash, will also shed microfibers. And we learned before that there are trillions in the ocean, so we don't want to contribute to that issue either. Otherwise, you can now buy laundry bags which would capture a microfiber during the wash. So all of the cloths would go into a laundry bag, or if the laundry is done off-site, it would be a way to maybe engage with the laundry provider and ask them to do that on your behalf. But you would also need to consider now probably a higher amount reusable, because you're going to use a lot more regulation around how often they're used. Speaking about personal protective equipment, generally kitchen staff are very well trained when it comes to the use of gloves. Other staff and the general public are not. Wearing gloves gives the impression that the hands are clean. So obviously your hands are clean, but the gloves aren't. And if you go out now, all of us probably, to supermarkets or to anywhere in this time, in COVID-19 time, we will see people with gloves regularly, touching their face, touching their hair, touching the things that other people have touched, because of this perception that our hands are clean. And this would be the same in a hotel. So receptionists and bar staff and guest service staff don't need gloves unless it's been mandated in your destination to do that. It's much better to think about how to implement more hand washing, more regular hand washing, maybe installing more hand washing areas so that they're easily accessible by staff and the public, or to have non-touch sanitizers that are available for staff, and to very much get into the hand hygiene rather than the gloves are going to keep us safe. And then finally, if you move on one more slide, Angela, this is an actual picture that will come up in a moment from LinkedIn, from a transfer company, a private taxi transfer company, wrapping their single-use bottles of plastic in single use. And I think, you know, COVID-19 could be with us for up to 2 years, possibly longer. The unnecessary single-use plastic we use today because of COVID-19 is going to be with us for centuries, and we've just got to find a better balance. And whilst it may not be in the very, very short term, this is what I hope we can all aim for the mid to longer term. So finally, our 5 top tips that we would share with any hotel, and we can make this presentation available to you. We're happy to do that if Angela moves on for me there. Number 1 is to revisit brand standards with a waste reduction focus in mind. So to have all of the right people around the table and say, if we were going to make a change, what can we do that reduces waste? What can we do that keeps us safe and healthy? Number 2, to try wherever possible to prioritize elimination over replacement. You don't have to replace the plastic comb with a bamboo comb. You don't have to replace the plastic thing over the toilet with a paper one to tell people it's clean. There are different ways that we can do this. Number 3, not all alternatives are as green as they seem, so take the time to make those decisions when it comes to procuring if you need to get alternatives. Number 4, we didn't discuss in much detail here, but reassign budgets. What we mean here is if you had to, or if you wanted to introduce some reusable laundry bags, let's say, reusable cups that are around the pool, and you're going to brand those, what we've found works quite well is to market that, or take the budget from the marketing budget, not from the food and beverage budget, not from the housekeeping budget that tend to be very tight, but from a marketing budget, because technically this is a marketing opportunity if you're branding some merchandise of some sort. So rather than the pens, the paper, the other things that you find in hotel rooms that are also going to catch germs, or the key rings or whatever it is hotels give out, if you go to World Travel Market you'll get all sorts of rubbish merchandise. Find those budgets and take some of the marketing budget to do some of this work, and then use the downtime now to make structural changes, train staff online. There are opportunities to do that. Not a lot of staff are in work at the moment, so it may be an opportunity to take them through e-learning, for instance, and I'll share a very quick slide on that as we finish. So we are creating a range of e-learning tools so that we can take people through a series of steps to help them understand why this is important and what they can do to play their part. And yeah, I think that's it from me. I think that's everything that I can cover, and I'm terribly sorry for the technical difficulties. Yes, that's where we post our e-learning once it's ready and we're up and running. So we'll be having an e-learning in there. And yes, if you want to contact us for any information, I'm very happy to share this presentation from Angela, or you can follow us on any of the social media buttons that you see there, and contact us on email. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Jo, for sharing with us this masterclass, and thanks everybody for holding on through the technical issues that we encountered today due to the lack of a good internet connection. So we are going now to some Q&A. We've gone a bit past down the time that we were expecting this masterclass to last, but I think everything was very interesting what Jo was saying. So it was just great to to share this session with her. Karen, have you got any questions lined up that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, we have actually two. One is really fast because do you have any contacts for companies who make these water systems, Jo? Or can you recommend suppliers or something?
Yes, absolutely. There are different suppliers in different areas of the world. So we always try to recommend local, as local as possible. So I'll put a list together of those and I'll share them with you, and perhaps we can disperse that through an email or an update or some way of sharing that with participants.
Perfect. Actually, for the people who connect today, we can send them an email without
Fantastic.
problem. Great. And the other is more like a comment, but I think is also a question. It's from Filipos, and he says that in Cyprus they have students coming mainly from UK during the COVID-19, and they have to stay in a hotel room for 14 days in isolation. But the amount of single-use plastic was tremendous, and they had no proper disposal. So maybe I think that question could be like, what's the recommendation for those hotels that are having people on isolation?
Yeah, I think that's it's really difficult issues with COVID at the moment. Presumably they need to have food and drinks taken to the room, and that needs to be done in a way that safeguards the staff as well as safeguarding the guests. There are some potential reusable items that could be delivered as part of room service. So not everything needs to go in a styrofoam takeaway box, for instance. Food can be plated, can be covered and still delivered to the room so it's not contaminated, but it very much depends on what the local regulations are telling the hotels to do. So we would never ask a hotel to go against the local regulations. We would need to know what they are in order to make a set of our own recommendations to see if we could find a balance there. So it's quite difficult. I don't think I've got the answer here. I would need to have some, perhaps Philippos and I can connect around that separately. I know Philippos quite well, so happy to do that.
Jo, I have one question myself that arises through your presentation. From your experience and the workshops you've been doing, is it harder to engage head of departments, or is it harder to engage just staff, like as means of like in the housekeeping department? Is it easier to engage the chambermaids, or is it easier to engage the head of the department that knows what changes they need to happen?
I don't think it's the role that makes a difference. I think it's the person. So if somebody is very engaged in environmental issues anyway, maybe they're very aware of them, maybe they see waste and plastic all the time on the way into work, then it doesn't really matter or the operational department they're in. It's the enthusiasm to change. And once you find maybe 2 or 3 people in the hotel that are very enthusiastic about this, it's an opportunity to create a green team or even a plastic reduction team, whatever you want to. But rather than focus on whose job it's related to, it's to get that enthusiasm and get people together to look at changes. And I think they then start to engage the others that might be more reticent. However, saying that, it's very important that heads of department and management support those actions, because you can have a very engaged team, but it's people higher up the chain that generally have to make the decisions on change, that hold the budget for that. And sometimes it requires money, it requires people's time to be given some free time to attend a course. So it's very personal. I think it really is down to finding those super duper excited people that want to make a difference and engage them and get them to get others on board.
Great, thank you. I think we have a question for Biba. Is asking about any suggestions to replace toiletries, like small toiletries. What would you suggest here?
I would suggest not replacing them first of all, but that's because I like to be controversial. Say maybe we don't actually need them, and this is the time to change those expectations. If you absolutely have to keep miniature toiletries for whatever reason, one good way to at least minimize the environmental impact is to choose more recycled content. So for instance, Rachel and I were speaking to some people the other day, and it's true that most of the miniature toiletries are made from HDPE type plastic. So there are 7 types of plastic. So HDPE are what most toiletries are made out of. And that's not necessarily as recyclable as the PET plastic, which would be a bottled water, that type of thing. So if we could start to create a more circular approach to the types of material that we use, in some cases, recycled plastic is actually going to be a better option than other alternatives, because it creates a demand for it. It makes people want to pay more for it in the recycling world, and that means we can hopefully keep it out of litter, and we can do what we were supposed to do with plastic in the first place, which is keep reusing it and reusing it and reusing it, and not just using it once. But we have a lot on our website about that, and actually we have a free download on the website that is dedicated to toiletries, so it might be an idea for people to go there and they can download that for free.
Talking about circular approaches, we learned this initiative in Fitur this year, the Soaps for Hope. So instead of giving plastic toiletries, they were given just bars of hopes, individual bars of hopes, and then of soaps. And then these were taken into this project for giving soaps to more vulnerable communities that didn't have access to it. So I mean, there are a lot of circular approaches around that don't involve single-use plastic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of different opportunities, and a good idea is to have a look locally at what's going on in whichever destination you're in, because it's obviously, you know, our recommendations here today are quite generic. All of them need to be applied with a local relevance, local context, the demographic of the customer. So there are lots of things to consider. And it is useful to look at what's happening locally and see what's available to you there.
Great, yeah, well, thank you very much. I don't know, Karen, if there's any other questions in our YouTube channel or anywhere else that you may want to share with us.
We have a last one that is, what can you do now that is coronavirus time? Is it safe to recycle when we know that the virus can stay longer in some items?
There are a range of different advices out at the moment, which I think that the key, again, is to follow the local standards. But from what I know is happening in the UK, you can still recycle, but the advice to people is to leave the recycling for 3 days before it's actually put into the recycling bin. So you leave it without touching it. So for a hotel, this would mean, I mean, hopefully they would have huge recycling bins anyway, or the big, the big recycling bins that they would use all of the time. Maybe they need some more, but the idea would be keep them for 3 days so that the collection of those would not be daily. And by the time the 3 days is up, then the virus is supposed to no longer be on those items, and it's safe for the collectors to actually collect. So that's the advice that we've heard. Again, we would suggest that people follow the local standards on that and find out what they're being told to do. In some cases, they do actually need to bag, even though it's recycling, they still need to put it in plastic bags, or they need to put them into 2 plastic bags. But at least it's still going into the recycling bin, and the recyclers know what to do when it gets there, and it's reducing that risk of contamination.
Okay, well, I think that's everything from this masterclass. Thanks very much, Jo, for being here with us today, and thanks all the participants that joined the quiz and stay with us right to the end. We will be uploading this recording in our YouTube channel, in Travindi YouTube channel, as well as what is already in Cómo's YouTube channel. If you have any other questions regarding to this masterclass, you can always tweet them at Travindi_ES. And we will, you can also tag Travel Without Plastic directly. The username is No Plastic Travel, right? I think. So
yep,
yeah,
right.
just give us a shout if you have any more questions via YouTube, social media, even Facebook or Instagram. Again, thanks, Jo, for sharing your knowledge. It's really great to share this session with you and learn a little bit more about how we can reduce our footprint at hotels.
Thank you very much, everyone, and apologies again for the technical difficulties on my end. Thanks for staying with us.
Don't worry, Jo. It was a pleasure to listen to you, and actually I learned a lot. So thank you, and hope to see you soon.
Great, thank you. Take care, everybody.
You
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.